something we could do to change the mood a little bit. Holy smokes! But I'm not sure we should. That's the point. So I'm at a crossroads there a little bit. This will change the mood. Kids, get out of here. I'm not sure it's for the better, but it'll change. And I'll give you guys a head start to try to find the book of 3 John. If you've gone to Jude, turn one page back. If you get to the book of Revelation at the very end of your Bible, turn a couple pages back, and you'll find the New Testament one-page book of 3 John. I don't know what I said. 3 John. Okay. Most of us know the term helicopter parent, or in my case, grandparent. We know what helicopter parents are and grandparents. It's where they stay so close to their children or grandchildren that nothing bad can happen to them. And most of that is fine, but not all of it. Not all of it's okay. And we should talk about that someday. Well, I learned a new term, lawnmower parent. Okay? A lawnmower parent or grandparent, this is where they cut the path ahead of the child, where the child really has very little say, just like this boy with the Buddhist monk thing. They are told who they're going to be and what they're going to be like, but at the same time, the helicopter lawnmower, they take away any of the potential, we used to call them school of hard knock opportunities for people to grow up. And we have these older children that, quite frankly, do not know how to behave, often in public and other places as well. And because parents demand that things be done or avoided being done, the way they are making their child in their own image, if you will. Now, doesn't that sound like a great topical series on parenting to tick a bunch of you off? Well, thank the good Lord, that's not our purpose today. But my purpose today is 2 things. One is to get your attention, and I think I have it. Those who are still parents anyway. And I really want us to look at helicopter or lawnmower leaders and how they can be so damaging to a local body of believers. Because I believe that's what 3 John talks about. If you found it, good for you. Give yourself a gold star. Because it's pretty hard to find in the New Testament here. But this is a very personal letter that the old John, this same John who wrote the Gospel of John, 1 John, 2 John, and 3 John. This is the disciple whom Jesus loved. At least that was his favorite nickname for himself. And in this personal letter, we're called to a life of encouragement, to honestly look at our ministry motives, and to live a life of sacrificial involvement with other people. That's what I talked to the Pulse kids about this morning, about having a Paul, a Barnabas, and a Timothy in your life and being that to someone else. Well, both 1 and 2 John address different warnings against apostasy, which is false teaching, and the Christian behavior that is appropriate in each of those circumstances. We're not going to cover those today, but I'll give you a quick highlight of 2 John. In 2 John, we see that sometimes, on occasions, it's okay for us to not show hospitality. Now, when our church hears the word hospitality, we think 3 donuts and a cookie, right? That is not what this is talking about, although it's part of it. Yes, it's to treat people well, but it's to lodge them and to send them resources so they can get to where they're going to go next. Hospitality was a big deal. I love our hospitality team. Please do not misunderstand. But this is beyond that. And sometimes it's okay not to show hospitality, especially when people are trying to spiritually impose themselves into our lives, especially with false teaching. They're trying to lead us astray. John wrote that letter to a group of people who were faced with these itinerant preachers, these philosophers and teachers who sometimes were great and sometimes were not so great. And so 2 John was written to help that congregation discern who should be welcomed and who shouldn't be. So in that letter, John says, I have much to write to you, but I don't want to use paper and ink. Instead, I hope to visit you and talk to you face to face, so that our joy may be complete. One little side note that has very little to do with today's message is whenever you read John, something that John wrote, joy is involved. 1 John, I think it's 1:3. He says, our fellowship is the Father. We want you to have fellowship with us. And if you have fellowship with the Father, your fellowship will be with us, that our joy may be complete. 2 John, the verse I just read to you, so that our joy may be complete. Can't wait to see you again, so that our joy can be complete. And we'll see in 3 John, verse 3, that he has no greater joy than to hear that his spiritual children walk in the truth. So it's kind of important. And so what happens in 2 John and 1 John to some degree results in John needing to write to this congregation one more time before he gets there. I'll read all 14 verses of 3 John. The elder to the beloved Gaius, whom I love in the truth. Beloved, I pray that all may go well with you, and you may be in good health as it goes well with your soul. For I rejoiced greatly when the brothers came and testified to your truth. And indeed, you are walking in the truth. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth. Beloved, it is a faithful thing you do in all your efforts for these brothers, strangers as they are, who testified to your love before the church. You will do well to send them on their journey in a manner worthy of God. For they have gone out for the sake of the name, accepting nothing from the Gentiles. Therefore, we ought to support people like these, that we may be fellow workers for the truth. I've written something to the church, but Diotrephes, who likes to put himself first, does not acknowledge our authority. So if I come, I will bring up what he is doing, talking wicked nonsense about us. And not content with that, he refuses to welcome the brothers, and also stops those who want to and puts them out of the church. Beloved, do not imitate evil, but imitate good. Whoever does good is from God. Whoever does evil has not seen God. Demetrius has received a good testimony from everyone, and from the truth itself. We also add our testimony, and you know that our testimony is true. I have much to write to you, but I would rather not write with pen and ink. I hope to see you soon, and we will talk face to face. Peace be to you. The friends greet you. Greet the friends, every one of them. And that's it. There's 3 John. Sounds a lot like 2 John. Well, there's this pendulum swing and it needs to be resolved. The situation is around these lawnmower leader and these first century hospitality practices, right? In that day, when you offered hospitality, you were aligning yourself with the teaching and the character and the philosophy of the stranger, now guest. You were saying, my guest is a reflection of me and everything that I believe. I'm vouching for them. Which brings our attention, of the first of several times, to Demetrius. Demetrius is an itinerant preacher who's coming from outside their community. He needs hospitality to help in the acceptance that would garner them to say, this is one of the guys you should give hospitality to. John writes, 3 John. John gives that letter to Demetrius. Demetrius gives that letter to Gaius. He was a wealthy, hospitable Christian who hosted many traveling preachers. This letter served to authenticate that Demetrius was coming on behalf of John himself, the disciple of Jesus. Demetrius hasn't just walked into the town and said, hey, somebody take care of me, please. I'm looking for free lodging and food and a little coin to get to my next place. Demetrius didn't say that, right? He walks into the town. He has this letter from John, which basically says, this man is a faithful servant of Jesus, and I'm vouching for him. He's part of my coaching tree. He's part of my discipleship tree, right? Treat him like you would me. I personally was ordained by South Baptist Church in Flint, Michigan, eons ago, whenever that was. It came about as a result of me going through this process. I had to write a doctrinal paper on everything that I believed, and then I gave that out to a bunch of pastors in the area and some guests that I had brought in, and they read my paper, and then they made me defend it. It was about a 2.5-hour ordeal. And they decided whether or not I was fit for the gospel. And that's, that happened. That's how it happens with many Baptist-type scenarios, okay? Not so much anymore, but I'll tell you what, that's sad. We'll get to that another day. Same sermon as the parenting thing, maybe. So whenever I visited another church or someone asked me if I could do something for them, churchy-wise, I could show them that I was an ordained pastor, okay? Without even knowing me, the leaders in that church would be able to start with a premise that I had been approved by other people who they were at least aware of, right? And I would speak to retreats and conferences and camps and stuff like that. You could do, in some churches out in the Midwest, you weren't allowed to do a wedding in a different church unless you were ordained. And in many states back then, you weren't allowed to marry or bury unless you were an ordained minister. Now, if you own a fish tank, you can do that. So it's pretty easy now. But many states required ordination to do those kinds of things. And it just kind of served as a letter of recommendation that someone had checked you out and approved of you. That's all it really means. So now here's Demetrius walking into town with this letter of recommendation from the Apostle John. A letter of credibility. You don't get a higher recommendation than someone who was one of the original disciples, now apostles. His reputation was affirmed by all who knew him. This is Demetrius. And his ministry was affirmed by the truth itself. He was personally vouched for by the disciple that called himself the one that Jesus loved, right? Demetrius shouldn't have to say anything. Everyone says it for him. Let's stop and think about what that means for us for a minute. If you are asked to, and some of you have, I know some of you in this audience have done pastor-like things for other people. And I think it's great. But you go with the recommendation, or in some senses the authority of your sending church, right? Just last month, Steve Wilson, one of our deacons, did that. He was officiated a funeral. And he did that, with our blessing and recommendation. But what do people say about you? What would your recommendation be? I think it's a fair question. And I'm going to say this a couple times, but this is a no binoculars sermon. You don't get to put on your binoculars and say, oh, guess who's not here? They really needed to be here today. Or guess who's here? You punch the guy next to you, right? Pay attention. You need to hear this. No. This is no binoculars. This is mirrors only. You hold that mirror up and you see you. Get it? You'll see why in a minute. All right? So there's even more important applications here. But Demetrius was well thought of by John and everyone who knew him and the truth itself. You see, we're really all involved in ministry in some way. And think about people in your life right now that's just a good example of what it means to follow Jesus. And unfortunately, you can think of probably a couple more people who might not be the best example of following Jesus. It's one thing for us to think that we're doing a good job. It's another for others to see it to the point where they would vouch for us. That's kind of the point here. Right? And we're not looking for congratulations. It's just self-reflection. That's why it's mirrors only. The second thing I think that's kind of here is, are we in the habit of encouraging one another? Again, I taught Pulse this morning. Had a great time. I'm never really sure if they have a great time or not. Right? They look like they're having fun when they're eating our hospitality. But I don't really know other than that. You'll have to ask them. Not just in general. Oh, it's so good to see you. And it is. It's good to see you. But are we talking about when we watch other people serve Jesus, do we encourage them in that? One of our other deacons, Pete, taught the Grow class today. How'd that go? Yeah, thumbs down everywhere. Pete, I'm so sorry. No, it was amazing. I wasn't even there, and I know it was because I know him. I know what he cares about. Worst thing about teaching Pulse is Isaac taught it before I did. And he's amazing. It's like following a video. You know what I'm saying? And you can encourage each other in their work for God. When I think about how Wire Choir started eons ago, and what a ragtag bunch of pitiful souls we were. And though most of that is still true, we have so much fun playing together and singing together for you. It is a ministry that we give, but I got to tell you, we get more out of it, right? I had a blast today. I had a blast this morning. Do we encourage each other? I don't think we do that enough. Thanks for your service. Thanks for your encouragement. You're a blessing. You walked beside me when things got difficult. You did this, you did that. You helped me to see Jesus. Encouraging each other is in the joy of serving, just together. Demetrius is called to a life of encouragement, and I think we should be too. So now let's move on to Diotrephes, our lawnmower leader, right? He has set himself up as the measure of all things to be approved of or not. From the way 3 John is worded, we can see that John has previously sent a different preacher or two to the church, but Diotrephes didn't accept that preacher, and he threatened anyone who did. Gaius apparently didn't care and showed hospitality anyway with his own resources. News of this situation sent back to John, and now we know why. Verses 5 and 6 were there, right? Knowing who to offer hospitality was not always easily discerned. So one of the things you do is you would carry a letter of recommendation from someone, and that's what happens here. And so if you get sent a preacher with a recommendation from whoever, if you reject that preacher, you're not really rejecting that preacher, are you? You're rejecting the one who recommended them. And John, in his younger days, had a different nickname. You remember? He was one of the sons of thunder. Now, I don't know if he was lightning or thunder, but I'll bet he did not take this real well. That's my guess. But with grace and truth, he is going to deal with it. So Diotrephes really is rejecting the Apostle John. John at this time, who's well advanced in years, hence the title in the first verse, John the Elder, right? Not just a role like we have elders and deacons here. John the old guy. That's what's going on here. John was, at this point in history, one of the last people still alive who hung out with Jesus as he walked on the earth. He saw Jesus. Again, he was the disciple Jesus loved. Jesus loved them all. But Jesus is the one, John is the one that Jesus said, hey, take care of my mom from the cross as he was crucified. So Diotrephes is actually rejecting the authority of the apostle. This is not just a difference of opinion, right? This is a spiritual battle that's creating real problems. Diotrephes isn't open to listen to the exhortations of John. Diotrephes wants nothing to do with it. He wants nothing to do with us, John says. He publicly puts down John and the preachers sent by him. He called it gossiping maliciously in one translation. He's not offering hospitality, and he refuses to welcome the brothers. He's bullying the church, and he put the people out of the church who are willing to offer hospitality to those people. Now, it's probable that Diotrephes was an unfortunate leader in this church, right? We don't really know why, but we've given him a modern labor. In churches, we would call him a power broker, right? A power broker. They're people in churches, sometimes they're leaders, sometimes they're not, who they use their influence, sometimes wealth, sometimes stature, sometimes pain in the neck circumstances if you don't do it their way. Position, family connection, some other non-godly characteristic to get their way as they lawnmower through. In ministry, they want their way. They're power. They're lawnmowers. They're power brokers. My way or the highway. So now this Diotrephes, someone who's willing to question the Apostle John. I cannot get over that. Can you tell? These people are dangerous. I have a few to point out today. Just kidding. Just kidding. Just kidding. We really don't have anyone like this in our church. But I will tell you a little secret, if you promise not to tell a soul. We've had them. We've had them, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 times in my 18 years. And as soon as we figure it out, or as soon as I figure it out with God's help and a couple clubs over the head, I didn't do anything except pray that God would remove them so that our unity would not be hindered. And I don't want to give you too many circumstances because you'll try to figure out who they are, because that's how we are. In every case, they moved, took a job, begged to go to the church plant, or whatever it happened to be. But whatever it was, God removed them. I didn't have to do anything except pray. So God, the unity of your church here is too important to have a Diotrephes. I find that amazing. Now, we had a deacon meeting last Tuesday. And I am here to tell you, we do not have one of these kinds of people on our board. We don't always agree. We had this huge poll that just ended Saturday night. And then after it ended, 3 more people voted. And we have so much unity about this particular topic that I think it was 4 and 4. But you know what we agree on? Jesus. Grace and truth. The Bible is God's word. Jesus is God's son. We're here for a reason, and you don't have to be just like us to be welcomed here. Everyone in that crazy room, as we try to muscle through the stuff we muscle through on deacon and elder meeting nights, we agree on the important stuff. And there is no Diotrephes, and there is no spirit of Diotrephes. And for that, I am grateful and thankful. But we can be tempted to be like that, and Diotrephes is the extreme, I grant you. But we can muscle our way or be passive aggressive and try to get our lawn-mowered way. We can do that. I can, certainly. And John's summary of his attitude, well, he loves to be first. Loves to be first. Well, some people cannot see beyond themselves. And if something works for them, it ought to work for everybody. Right? This is how God speaks to me. This is how he's going to speak to you. Or he's probably not really speaking to you. That's a spirit of Diotrephes. Right? We have to be careful. And some people, something works for them, and they're 100% convinced that they're right. And they might be. One of the hardest things I've had to tell people since I've been here is, there's a wrong way to be right. Now, there's never a right way to be wrong. But there's a wrong way to be right. And we work really hard at preventing that. Even when faithful ministry is being prevented, these people, when humble servants of Christ are trying to do what's right, they're the ones being hurt because this guy's casting them out of the church. The wisdom of the Bible and a guy who wrote the Bible, John, is being ignored. Well, we have to be careful with that. Diotrephes makes us look at our ministry motives. Why do I do what I do? Why do I do what I do? So now we move on to Gaius. This is a much happier story. It's clear that John knows Gaius personally. John calls him my dear friend. As a dear friend of John, he's a man who's obviously wealthy, and he's brimming with life and vitality spiritually. And preachers came into town. Diotrephes rejects them. Gaius takes care of them. He's equipped them what they need to do now and what they need to do and have to get to the next town. But he's just one man. And normally the local body would do that. Gaius is doing all he can to expand the gospel influence. He's doing it right. He's being and doing what he's supposed to be and do. And I don't know. I sometimes wonder who we're more like, Gaius or Diotrephes, right? In the busyness and the hardships of this world, no one feels isolated, we think. And yet modern life, many of us, once we finally leave church today, we will go home, we'll push a button and our garage door will open. We'll drive through and we'll push the button again and it'll close. And we can hope that none of our neighbors saw that we were home now. I suppose that's an extreme deal. We don't have to be, hey, you getting ready for the holiday? Yeah, I ordered everything online. Should be here today. We don't have to go shopping anymore, which, good thing, for me. But we can buy stuff online, Facebook, email, Twitter, or X, or all these social platforms give us the ability to say that we have a social life, when in reality we're further and further from anyone. We're more alone than we've ever been, right? How do we make sure people aren't strangers? That's the spirit of Gaius. I'm going to reach out to people, maybe open my home, maybe put myself out there, volunteering to be inconvenienced. Moving people away from the margin and including them as equals. That's Gaius. John commends Gaius big time for his faithfulness in the truth. Just amazing. So John calls himself the elder. Older people were very respected in that culture. And he was a spiritual leader to the church, it's obvious. He has no greater joy than to hear that people like Gaius are walking in the truth. We love that verse for our own children and our grandkids, us helicopter type people. But this is our spiritual children. And I thought, who are my spiritual children? Who are my spiritual children here? Because this is where God's planted me for a while. Verse 9, but Diotrephes, John turns the corner. He says 4 things about Diotrephes. They're all bad. He loves to put himself first. He slanders. He's spreading lies. He's talking wicked nonsense about us. He refuses to welcome other believers. And he stopped those who wants to welcome them and puts them out of the church. He closes up by saying, don't imitate what's evil. It's not from God. And he says, Demetrius is a great guy. You should welcome him like you welcome me. And again, at this point in human history, as we get ready to close out here, God has not allowed email to be invented yet here. And the devil has not invented social media yet either. So the letters were hand-delivered. And just like Onesimus, the runaway slave, hand-delivers the letter to his master from Paul in Philemon, Demetrius is hand-delivering this letter to Gaius. Just crazy. Verse 13 and 14, I would have written more, but I'll be there soon. I'll clean this up. Sounds Sons of Thunderish to me. But he didn't lose his cool. Hey, make sure you tell everyone I said hi. Tell the friends. The friends were the believers, right? The believers. This little letter gives us 4 sides of well-intended, probably, but failed leadership by a lawnmower leader. As I look at myself today, not anyone else, I would invite you to do the same. Do I need to be first? Verse 9. Usually due to the insecurity of the leader. Big difference between receiving honor or praise than demanding honor and praise. There's a big difference. One of the Pauls in my life is an author, and I'll tell this illustration and I'll try to shut it down pretty quick here. So he's doing his normal sermon stuff, and he does this sermon, and this guy who's a big corporate leader, CEO type person, loved it. And he goes, hey, happened to be, his name is Larry. Hey, Larry, would you do that for a conference I'm having? I'll fly you there, take care of all the expenses. I'll even pay you a little bit. And I goes, cool. Yeah, I'll do that. Gets on the plane, and his ticket is row 2. He's in first class. He couldn't believe it. So he's in first class. He goes to the hotel. He's way up top in the hotel. Incredibly nice suite. And so he does his thing. He doesn't have to study anything. He did it a couple weeks ago in church. He dumps the stuff on these people this guy wanted him to dump it on. And he goes home. He receives a check for $2,500, which is a little bit more than he made that Sunday that he gave it. okay? And so he asked him again, hey, would you be willing to do that again if I ever needed you? And Larry goes, anytime. So he does it again, same deal, first class, boom, boom, boom. Does it again, same deal, boom, 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 boom. Ask him a fourth time, does it again, except there was a clerical error. And his ticket said row 27, which is what mine usually says. And it's no legroom coach. And he gets to the hotel, same mistake was made. He's on the second floor, right above the pool. He hears all this stuff. And he's nervous about what he's going to get for doing this. And all of a sudden he says, what's the deal? And he recognized in his own life a spirit of Diotrephes. And he confessed his own personal private sin to his friend, who then scolded the admin who goofed up, right? This stuff, because it wasn't supposed to be that way. But he had forgotten that he was blessed. But then he demanded it, and it ruined everything. I think that's something. Also, be careful of a critical spirit, verse 10. Run from leaders and teachers that are always criticals of others. We see the best in ourselves. We often see the worst in others, and I'll just you got to be careful. The third thing I see in verse 10 is Diotrephes felt he and those who agreed or submitted to him were the only ones that were right. Be careful of an arrogant, holy huddle mentality. If you're not exactly like us, you're not welcome here. There are people in this room today that think I'm wrong on many points of doctrine and finer points of theology. And I agree with them that one of us is wrong. But like the deacons and the elders, we agree on Jesus. We agree on why he's put us here in this place, in this gorgeous place of the Ogden Valley, in this functional building with no carpet, this battleship of a training station and encouragement center for people who want to live for God. I think about the examples. Jesus' disciples didn't agree on things. Who was the greatest? Matthew was a Jewish tax collector for Rome. Simon the Zealot wanted to overthrow the Roman Empire. I'll bet Jesus made them roommates. Right? And then the last thing, intimidation. Lead with an iron fist to still fear. It's a terrible thing to do. We have to be careful here because respectful fear is the beginning of wisdom, the Bible tells us. But very few of us like to submit to anyone or anything anyway. But be careful when we demand that people submit to our way all the time. It's a dangerous, dangerous thing. Well, I've told you a little bit randomly and scattered about this bizarre book, 3 John. Remember, the instrument you're supposed to use today is a mirror, not binoculars. And may God give us the grace to hear these calls to not be a lawnmower leader. The best example is servant leadership or follow my example leadership. And it looks like that's what John was commending in Gaius and condemning in Diotrephes. May God give us the grace to hear these calls, put them into practice as we do our best to daily live out the gospel of grace and truth and be more like Jesus. Next week, Lord willing, we will start our holiday season. Please, if you'd like to be prayed for or prayed with, I'm going to ask our prayer team to meet just beyond the sound booth and there in the back in front of the sound booth today because there's a rehearsal that's going to get ready here pretty quick. Pray with me, please. God, thank you for an opportunity to look at a book that very few people look at. And you can read it in 90 seconds if you wanted to. But I do pray that we would learn the lesson to not be like Diotrephes, but to be like Gaius and be hospitable to people who love you like we love you. And be hospitable, quite frankly, to view everyone like you see them and try to increase your kingdom here. I'll thank you and praise you for the holiday season as it launches in many respects this week, and that you would help us to make sure that we don't miss the power of the spiritual applications of all these things going around us. In Jesus' name, amen. You are dismissed. Thank you.